a couple guests who are not currently at Bridgeway. Pastor Chris Wolf is in the room. And as I mentioned, he's waving right now. You could greet him in the chat box. He's from Grace Community Church. He's going to be their new campus pastor in West Friendship. And so Chris joins us this morning. And Chris was with us a couple Friday nights ago when we did the panel discussion with Pastor Thomas and Bill Green and Chris and I. And so Chris is popping in, and he wants to see how these breakout groups work on Zoom so that they can implement that over at Grace as well. So I wanted to greet him. You may know Karsten. Karsten's a part of the Bridgeway family, but Karsten came over from Faith Christian Fellowship over in the Penn Lucie area, and Karsten brought a friend with him this morning. So you might want to greet one of our guests, Tim Cannon. Tim Cannon is from Faith Christian Fellowship. So welcome, Tim. We're glad that you popped in. If there are any other guests to Bridgeway this morning, let us know in the chat box. We could greet you as well. Milt Hall opened us up in prayer. Milt's a former elder at Bridgeway and now in the DC area. Mike, I'm not going to say you're a former Bridgeway guy. We still consider you a part of the family, but Mike has relocated to Florida, and Mike Corcoran's in the room as well. You may remember Mike from the parking crew and security team. So that's good for greetings. Also, Ryan Lee is in the room. Ryan is the leader of our Leverage ministry, and so appreciate Ryan leading that ministry. All right, enough on the greetings. Can I jump to the word? You've got a couple options, guys, who have laptops. You can hit speaker view, where just the one who's speaking is up, or you can hit grid view and just see everyone. And then, you can start voting on the best COVID beard. Greg, I see you playing with your beard there. Man, I think you're going to get my vote. I was going to vote for Chris, but I'm guessing Chris had that thing going a long time before COVID started. So you guys can guess for best COVID beard. Guy, you got a pretty good one going there too. I see. Carl, I think you started yours before COVID, so I don't know if I can give you props or not. Hey, if you guys would jump into John 11 with me, that would be great. It's a rather lengthy passage. Hang with me, and I'm gonna read the passage and make some comments throughout that will sort of tee us up for some discussion time when we go to the breakout groups. Once you get in those breakout groups, of course, unmute yourself so that you can have a time of discussion there. Try not to talk over one another when you get in those discussion groups, but you'll figure it out. Smart people. Oh, and I see Frank Eastham, our COO, is in the room. Frank, we've been praying for Frank's health. Good to see you, brother. Look at that, Frank. He's even got scriptures going when he's on a video call. Look at that. He's got Joshua behind him there. All right, John chapter 11. This is the story about the death of Lazarus. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. So here we've got the setting, the situation. You got two sisters who are very concerned for their brother. They're in the midst of crisis because their brother is sick, and they appeal to Jesus. So let's think about how this works out in our lives. When we've got great concerns, things that we're desperate about, who do we run to? We run to Jesus too, and we put our requests before him. So what are you desperate about right now? Just contemplate that even now in your own mind. What are you desperate about now? Is it something related to this COVID virus? Are you desperately wanting to be well? Are you desperately wanting someone who is ill to be well? Are you wanting to stay employed? Are you wanting your financial situation to be able to work out? The other people that you're concerned with, are you getting stir crazy and anxious with the current situations? Many of us are crying out to the Lord. We're asking Jesus to show up, and we're asking him to help us right now. Many of us are in that situation. So put ourselves into the story. Like Mary and Martha, we're asking Jesus to show up in a unique and special way. We're asking him to do something exceedingly beyond we could even ask or imagine. And so what happens? So verse 4, when he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, that so that God's Son may be glorified through it." So I want you to see what's going on here. Jesus knows what's going on. Jesus has the omniscience to know our circumstances. He knows what's going on. He has the power, the omnipotence to do whatever he's going to do to bring himself glory. But Jesus institutes a divine delay here. I want you to catch that. Jesus doesn't run and heal a sick man. Jesus isn't interested in healing a sick man. Jesus is interested in raising a dead man. In all of our lives, gentlemen, Jesus will sometimes delay. He will not necessarily quickly respond to the desires of our hearts because his purposes are greater than our purposes. I want us to see that in this story. When you're begging of the Lord for him to show up and he doesn't show up right away, like Mary and Martha, we need to continue to believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and yet he may have a different purpose in mind. Now, Mary and Martha struggled, and we're going to see that in the narrative. They struggled, but they didn't struggle with who Jesus was. They struggled with how Jesus was responding. And we might struggle with that as well. But let's never forget who Jesus is and trust in his divine purposes. Let's keep our faith, but we may not understand what he's doing. And so that's why in James 1:5, we're encouraged. If anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God. The whole context of that James 1 is that they've fallen into trials. And James is saying to them, hey, you can count this as joy because you know at the other end of the trial, if you persevere, you're going to come out more mature and more complete. But if you lack wisdom in the midst of the trial, cry out to God. God, what is your intent in this? And he will liberally pour out wisdom to us. So what happens here? Verse 5 of John chapter 11. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. That's important to remember, isn't it? When Jesus doesn't show up the way we want him to. God is too wise to make a mistake, gentlemen. He's too loving to be unkind. He's too powerful for his purposes to be thwarted. You can trust him regardless of the circumstance, and regardless of whether his answer to your begging and urging prayers are yes, no, or not yet. Verse 6, so when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed there for 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they see by the world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light. And after he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death. Lazarus had actually died. But his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. I mean, isn't this interesting? This is Thomas the doubter, and he's really struggling with Jesus' strategy here. And Thomas pretty much throws in the towel. Yeah, let's just go. Yep, we're going to be dead with Lazarus as well. On his arrival, verse 17, Jesus found Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Dead for 4 days. A lot of pain, a lot of grief in those 4 days, I'm sure, that these sisters experienced and all the friends experienced. Sometimes Jesus will let us go through a difficult season where we even experience a sense of loss and deep pain because he has a higher purpose. Will we trust him in the midst of that? Will we trust that he's sovereignly orchestrating all the details of our lives for his glory and for our good. Will we trust him in the midst of that? Okay, let me pick up here. Verse 18, now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Look at the confidence Martha had in the power of Jesus. You can do it, Jesus. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I'm the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. So Martha's faith and confidence in who Jesus was didn't waver. She just struggled with the present circumstances. But look at the double meaning of what Jesus is saying here. If you believe in Jesus, you'll never have to die the second death. Born once, naturally, you're going to die twice, physically and spiritually. Born twice, naturally and spiritually, born again, then you only have to die once. The natural life, but you'll live forever in eternity. So that's an urging for all of us to trust Jesus Christ alone for our eternal life so that we might live forever in him. Okay, so let's go to verse 28. After she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher's here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Look at this, deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Why was Jesus troubled? And look at verse 35, the shortest verse in the Bible. Jesus wept. Why did Jesus weep? These were tears of empathy. Jesus wasn't weeping because Lazarus was dead. He knew that he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Jesus was weeping because of the pain on those that he loved, their faces. So even in the midst of a divine delay, that doesn't mean that Jesus is ignoring you. He's empathizing with you. He's grieving with you in the midst of your pain, even if he knows the good answer on the other side. So he's not necessarily telling you to suck it up and just hang in there until the end. He's weeping with you in the midst of that. He treasures our tears and stores them up in a bottle, the Old Testament tells us. So Jesus has great compassion. He said in verse 34, where have you laid him? Verse 36, then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could he not have opened the eyes of the blind man? Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he's been there 4 days. Clearly evidence that Lazarus was dead, not just naturally sleeping. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Take off the grave clothes and let them go. Has Jesus ever resurrected something in your life? That's step one. But are you still wearing the grave clothes? Are you still stuck in those old garments? And sometimes we need friends who will help to unwrap those grave clothes through prayer, through accountability, through admonishment sometimes, through help sometimes. This is a beautiful metaphor here. When we get into our breakout groups, you may want to share that God's doing a resurrection work in your life, but you're still struggling with those grave clothes. You know, maybe God has freed you from an addiction, but you kind of keep going back to it and keeping those grave clothes on. How can you, through the community of brothers, finally shed those grave clothes? So as you think about this passage, there's so many things that we could discuss, and we're